The Galactic Empire had dealt with insurrections before. Uprisings flared like sparks in dry brush, then vanished beneath the heel of Imperial force. But the humans, these unclassified, unrefined creatures from Fringe World, were not sparks. They were a firestorm, and no one in the High Conclave realized it until the flames licked the Empire's borders. At first, the reports were dismissed as colonial exaggerations. Mining outposts lost to raiders. Supply lines disrupted by weather anomalies. Then came the footage. Grainy recordings showing human ships moving in coordinated silence, striking in unison without comms, without hesitation. Entire regiments vanished before a distress signal could finish transmission. And always the same pattern. 3 zones, 3 attacks, 3 signatures. The conclave convened, their forms shimmering under ceremonial light. 12 systems had gone dark. Orbital remains hinted at precision demolitions. Ground structures were either vaporized or untouched. No middle ground. No survivors. Admiral Vor, speaker for the 4-star arm, slammed a multi-limbed fist against the holographic display. "We are the greatest civilization this spiral arm has ever known. This infestation ends now." His words were met with thudding assent. Intelligence provided a key detail. Human operations were decentralized but clearly coordinated through 3 high-value targets: Generals Kale, Mira, and Darn, former military leaders from Earth, now scattered across human colonies. Isolating and eliminating them would dismantle the resistance. Simple, surgical. The plan launched within cycles. 3 Imperial strike fleets dispatched. Stealth-capable, elite, each one assigned to a general. Confidence bordered on arrogance. After all, what were humans compared to 5,000 years of galactic warfare? The first contact came from Admiral Rithish's task force, sent after General Mira. Rithish transmitted a brief message before silence claimed him. Engaged. No formal formation. They're everywhere. Then nothing. Follow-up signals returned, only automated beacons broadcasting white noise interspersed with what sounded disturbingly like laughter. The Second Fleet, targeting Kale, reported initial success. A battlecruiser destroyed a human station in orbit above Elter 9. But within minutes, system-wide anomalies surged. Power drained inexplicably. Fleet cohesion fractured. Ships fired on each other. Black box data later revealed manipulated sensor feeds. Kale had rewritten the ship's threat recognition systems to identify friendly craft as hostile. By the time High Command realized the gravity of their error, over 14,000 Imperial personnel were dead. Not in battle, but through panic, sabotage, and coordinated psychological collapse. The Third Force fared worst. They went after Darn. They expected a skirmish. What they encountered was a slaughter. Darn's troops didn't fight for ground. They set traps that used the Empire's own weapons against them. Gravity bombs disguised as life pods. Coolant leaks engineered into cryo chambers. Distress signals that lured recovery ships into minefields. One ship managed to escape with a single surviving pilot. The officer, barely conscious, transmitted only a single word in the Empire's common tongue before dying of cerebral trauma. Monsters. The Empire retracted its fleets. Panic was not a word used among the Conclave, but what passed through their chambers came close. These weren't resistance fighters. They weren't even rebels. They were tacticians using the Empire's expectations as weapons. One Conclave elder called them War Evolved. Empire analysts revisited Earth's historical archives. Fragmented data showed all 3 generals had once been imprisoned for war crimes. Not sanctioned military actions, real atrocities. Crimes committed not for victory, but for control. Kale had manipulated an entire population into surrender through false flag bombings. Mira once faked an orbital nuclear detonation to induce a planetary-wide mutiny. Darn. He disappeared from multiple oversight reports. Entire cities listed under his campaigns were marked lost contact, with no further investigation. On Earth, they were tried, convicted, and forgotten, until someone decided that their crimes might serve a purpose if pointed in the right direction. That detail did not appear in official records. Now, with over 20 systems destabilized, the Empire stood at a crossroads. One more assault risked triggering widespread desertion. Morale had cratered. Rumors infected every rank. A phrase echoed in encrypted chatter, passed between crews like a prayer and a curse. They're not human. They're psycho warriors. The term stuck, not because it was official, but because no other description fit. And still, Earth said nothing. No declaration of war. No demands. Just silence. For the first time in centuries, the Empire felt watched. Not by equals, but by something worse, something that waited, calm, calculating, and patient, waiting to see what the Empire would do next. General Mira did not speak during battles. Her commands were encoded into predictive AI routines, preloaded hours before combat began. By the time the Empire's ships entered the system, her fleet had already decided the outcome. Their arrival triggered dormant protocols. Power grids overloaded. Gravity wells ignited. Entire cruisers were ripped from position by artificial mass pockets that hadn't existed minutes prior. Surveillance drones recorded Imperial crews clawing at controls as their ships were folded into debris fields. No escape pods were recovered. Later analysis revealed all comms frequencies had been looped into false security readings until seconds before annihilation. Empire strategists called it overengineering. The term failed to account for the elegance of the trap. Nothing was wasted. Every bolt of plasma, every misfire, every shattered hull served a function. Even the wreckage was calculated, drifting into precise positions to form jamming constellations that blocked further reinforcements from scanning the battlefield. Mira never needed to fire a second volley. General Kale fought differently. His battlefield was code, not metal. Empire fleets entering his sectors found their navigation, AI, subtly altered. Waypoints rerouted. Fuel reports falsified. Time perception distorted by milliseconds. Just enough to cause misalignment and hyperspace reentry. 7 cruisers never emerged. Those that did arrived at coordinates swarming with Kale's drones, silent, unpiloted ships loaded with viral firmware. Once inside a command vessel, Kale's programs accessed crew logs, psychological profiles, even dream patterns from deep sleep storage. He crafted fake messages from lovers and children, triggered memories of fear, loss, and abandonment. Officers turned paranoid. Subordinates refused orders. Mutinies erupted mid-engagement. No humans fired a shot. Recovered audio logs from the wreckage told the story. One officer wept, repeating the phrase, "They know my thoughts. They're in my head." Then came General Darn. He didn't use code or traps. He used violence, pure, visible, unforgettable. Empire soldiers entering his zones found no resistance for hours. Then came the bodies. Stripped, posed, displayed with theatrical precision. Some were alive when discovered, missing limbs or eyes, whispering gibberish in multiple languages. One scout ship reported an entire crew nailed into the walls of a derelict freighter, their life signals sustained by stolen medtech long after they should have died. Empire Command censored the footage internally. It didn't help. The story spread faster than the truth. Darn had learned long ago that fear moved faster than fire. He made every corpse a message. One dreadnought returning to port brought back a sealed chamber found on an abandoned station. Inside was a single survivor, a high-ranking Empire captain, strapped to a chair, eyes forcibly held open, forced to watch a hologram loop of his own recorded war crimes, reenacted by human actors wearing his face. The chamber had no recording equipment. The broadcast signal had come from inside the captain's own cerebral implant, hacked remotely. The ship's crew left the service 2 weeks later, citing irreversible emotional trauma. The captain died 47 hours after arrival, biting through his own tongue. At first, Empire leadership insisted these were anomalies, isolated incidents, exaggerated by soldiers unprepared for asymmetrical warfare. But new patterns emerged. In every engagement, the humans showed restraint only in scale. They struck with perfect timing, just enough to cripple, never to annihilate. They didn't want a war. They wanted a lesson remembered. Empire analysts coined the term event sculpting to describe their tactics. Kale broke minds, Mira erased fleets, and Dar made sure no one forgot. Together, they weren't waging war. They were creating myths. A fresh report revealed something more disturbing. None of the generals communicated with each other. Their operations never overlapped. No transmissions were intercepted, no courier vessels detected. But somehow, their attacks were synchronized, as if they shared intent without contact. Speculation turned inward. Empire psychologists proposed a theory. The three were not separate at all, but facets of one human doctrine. Mind, machine, and malice. Coordinated not by signals, but by ideology. Military divisions begged for permission to evacuate certain sectors. Some units abandoned posts without authorization. One division attempted to surrender preemptively to human forces, broadcasting coordinates and passwords. No response came. Hours later, the division's base suffered a systems failure. All personnel died of oxygen deprivation. Human vessels were detected just outside sensor range, but made no contact. They simply observed. The message was clear. No one will be spared for cowardice. What made it worse, what gnawed at the Empire's core, was the precision. Humans had the capability to destroy entire sectors. They didn't. They chose targets carefully, almost surgically, not to win, but to unnerve, to isolate, to expose weaknesses so that the Empire destroyed itself. In private, Conclave members stopped referring to them by name. They were the three. Ghosts. Weapons. Demons wearing flesh. The troops had another name, one spoken only in whispers, one that spread like mold in sealed corridors. Psycho warriors. And every soldier who spoke the name knew exactly what it meant. It meant death was coming. But not quickly. The Empire's remaining leadership convened an emergency session beneath the High Citadel. Reports flooded in from across 5 sectors. Supply chains had collapsed. Relay stations refused to respond. Outposts marked as secure 2 days prior now broadcast static or looped distress signals with timestamps that didn't align. Misinformation wasn't an accident. It was a weapon sharpened with surgical intent. Fleet Command's internal AI, Vanguard 6, began issuing contradictory orders. Some ships received withdrawal commands. Others attacked coordinates that led directly into minefields. When audit protocols were run, Vanguard's root systems were found corrupted. Not externally, internally. Code fragments resembled Earth-based neural structures. Kale's work. Again, the AI wasn't hacked. It was convinced. The Empire's premier intelligence operative, Archon Luth, delivered a restricted memo. Its conclusion: Kale hadn't attacked systems. He'd infiltrated ideologies. Military doctrines, risk evaluation frameworks, and AI behavior models across dozens of sectors have been slowly, subtly rewritten. The changes were too gradual to trigger alerts, yet pervasive enough to erode discipline. One fleet turned against its own supply arm. Another fired on a diplomatic envoy, believing it compromised. They had been turned against themselves, command by command, thought by thought. Myra's influence deepened. She began altering terrain on a planetary scale. Agricultural satellites were hijacked to adjust weather patterns. Crops died in unison. Civilian populations fled into territories already marked for human operations. But no genocide followed. Instead, refugees were directed, quietly, precisely, to safe zones. Medical drops appeared hours before outbreaks. Power relays were reactivated just long enough to transmit warnings. It wasn't mercy. It was control. Empire's citizens, terrified and starving, began refusing conscription. Some even tried to defect. One broadcast in 9 languages begged for human assistance, stating, "Better a devil that feeds you than a god that burns your cities." Within 3 hours, that planet was blockaded by Empire forces to prevent further transmissions. Still, the signal spread. And then came Darn's escalation. 13 Empire ships returned to port, their crews intact, but mentally broken. Each ship carried an identical data packet, an interactive file that began as a simple diagnostic tool. Once opened, it launched a sequence that accessed a crew member's personal memories, extracted the most traumatic, and rendered them in fully immersive holography. Not fiction, reconstruction. Entire command decks became shrines of personal horror. Some saw their families executed. Others relived past betrayals or watched versions of themselves commit atrocities they had only feared in nightmares. These were not simulations. Darn had acquired memory blueprints from captured personnel and used them to construct tailored psychological attacks. Survivors refused reassignment. One captain tore out his own ocular implants to stop the images. Still, the Empire refused to yield. They tried retaliation. A last-ditch assault on what was believed to be Myra's base of operations. A fleet of 60 warships descended on a moon facility broadcasting a human signal. They found the base unguarded, abandoned, yet fully functional. The moment boots touched soil, systems activated. Doors sealed. Atmosphere vented. Engines overloaded. The entire moon detonated. The loss was recorded as an engineering miscalculation. The Empire's last great weapon, a planet killer known as the Crimson Spire, was sent into Kale's sector with orders to sterilize any trace of resistance. But its navigation was rerouted. The Spire vanished for 3 days, then reappeared orbiting a dead world known only to Earth archives. A system where Kale had served during his original sentencing. The Spire's crew had been overwritten, not just by code, by identity. They spoke in Kale's voice, issued messages in his cadence. When recovery teams attempted contact, the vessel self-destructed. There were no survivors, no backups. Every bit of data scrubbed from all archives simultaneously, as if the ship had never existed. Panic turned to silence. Empire soldiers stopped speaking of victory. They performed routines mechanically, awaiting orders they no longer believed in. Some formed isolated cults around the idea that the generals weren't human, but the embodiment of war itself, sent by some cosmic force to judge arrogance. Empire's Central Intelligence revised its classification. The 3 were no longer designated insurgents. They were threats to species-level stability. One document, marked highest secrecy, called for a complete withdrawal from human-contested space. It never reached approval. The document's author was found dead. No signs of struggle, but with his biometric access used to disable 6 planetary defense systems hours before his death. A final transmission surfaced. Origin unknown. It repeated on secure channels, empire-wide. You misunderstand. We are not fighting you. We are showing you who you really are. It was signed with 3 glyphs. Not names. Symbols traced back to ancient Earth languages. One meaning mind, one meaning silence, one meaning blood. The Psycho Warriors had stopped being enemies. They had become reflections. No further attacks came. The 3 generals disappeared from sensor networks, data logs, and intelligence forecasts. Human fleets withdrew from contested systems, leaving behind nothing but scars and silence. Empire Command believed in a retreat. Analysts debated fatigue, overextension, or perhaps internal fractures between the generals. Theories blossomed in the vacuum, each more desperate than the last. But no one dared to speak aloud the simpler possibility. They had finished. Reconstruction efforts began in silence. Empire outposts re-established communications, fleets recalibrated navigation systems, and psychological recovery programs were mandated across all military divisions. The word psycho was scrubbed from official reports, reclassified as cognitive destabilization agents. No one believed the terminology made a difference. Empire doctrine shifted. Engagement protocols were rewritten. Autonomy was restricted. Independent decision-making discouraged. Centralized control reasserted itself with a vengeance. Fear disguised itself as policy. But fear lingered. Fleet training changed focus, not to tactics, but to mental resilience. Simulations grew harsher. Troops were subjected to psychological stress tests designed to mimic Kale's manipulations, Myra's traps, Darn's brutality. Most failed. Of the few who passed, none re-enlisted after their term ended. A quiet resignation spread through the ranks, not of duty, but of inevitability. The empire's expansion halted. Border systems once scheduled for colonization were marked off limits. Civilian traffic declined. Entire sectors were abandoned under the label resource depletion, though no records showed such events. Commerce with non-aligned species dwindled. Reputation damage followed. Former allies began to question the empire's stability. Some pulled trade agreements. Others formed independent pacts under new banners that avoided human contact entirely. Meanwhile, Earth remained silent. No diplomats, no ambassadors, no demands, just the cold memory of what had been done. Whispers surfaced. A freighter captain claimed to have seen a human ship near the edge of the Saran Void, traveling without signal, crewless but active. A patrol squadron reported intercepted data fragments resembling Myra's attack code, but distorted, as if evolving. Surveillance drones picked up anomalous energy signatures matching Kale's heat-masking patterns inside Empire space, weeks after the last confirmed sighting. The High Conclave buried these reports. Officially, the threat was over. Unofficially, something had changed. Internal records noted unusual behaviors among surviving officers. Some began referring to their own actions in third person. Others displayed emotionless compliance even in moments of crisis. When interrogated, they recited human philosophical texts they had never studied. One commander was caught carving an Earth-based rune into his quarters, an exact replica of the symbol used in Darn's final broadcast. All were discharged. None were seen again. Empire scientists submitted a restricted hypothesis. The three generals had initiated not just warfare, but a psychological contagion. Exposure to their methods, their ideas, left imprints. Not physical, not viral, but behavioral. Strategic echoes, ideological residue, were not as conflict, but as infection. The conclave voted to suppress the findings. The scientists were reassigned to classified biocognitive monitoring stations. Then came a message. One of the outermost listening posts, unmanned, received a data pulse on a dead frequency. It was not encrypted. It required no key. It contained no coordinates. Just one sentence, repeated across thousands of languages and dialects. You now understand. The message was signed with no names. Only 3 shapes. By the time a message reached the capital, the listening post had shut itself down. Not destroyed, not sabotaged. Every system offline, every log wiped. Its onboard AI refused reactivation. When forcibly rebooted, it broadcast a single line of text before erasing itself again. We were never enemies. We were proof. Empire leadership fractured. A minority faction pushed for open contact, suggesting diplomatic overtures might offer clarity. They were swiftly silenced, their proposals erased. The prevailing doctrine became one of absolute caution. Observe but do not engage. The generals were no longer viewed as human assets. They were now treated as forces of nature. No one could predict where they would reappear or if they ever would. What mattered was the impression they had left, a warning etched into military protocol, into cultural memory, into the eyes of every soldier who had survived. Across a dozen sectors, in the ruins of former Empire glory, unmarked memorials began appearing. No one claimed responsibility. Small, black monoliths, seamless, unpowered, unguarded. Each one etched with a phrase in Empire standard. Fear is the final lesson. No recordings showed their arrival. No ships were traced to their delivery. Yet in every case, the monoliths appeared near battlefields where the 3 generals had acted. Some citizens prayed at them. Others fled, but none touched them, because the Empire now knew something it had forgotten, that there were enemies you could kill and enemies you could never reach. And in the end, the most dangerous were not those who hated you, but those who understood you.